What's up, friends? It's Davin. So the audio got messed up on my podcast, and it was a good episode, and so I just did my best to rescue it, and hope that you'll be gracious and listen regardless. Yeah, here we go. What's happening, my friends? My name is Davin Youngs, and this is the Becoming Sound podcast, and it's great to be with you here again. Whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or streaming the video version over at becomingsound.substack.com or on YouTube, Davin Youngs Becoming Sound. I'm stoked to hang out with you. It's been a beautiful day here in Chicago. It's February and we got above 30 degrees Fahrenheit and that felt so awesome. Y'all know if you've been in the Midwest in the deep winter that we treasure the sunshine and just a little bit of increase in temperature. And I was feeling a little extra pep in my step today, given those two things were present. And yeah, how are you all? How are you doing in the midst of everything that's going on? It has been quite the kickoff to a new year. And yeah, just wondering how you're doing. There's so much transpiring, whether it be the weather or the political climate or just whatever's going on in your personal life. I know for me, it's been a lot, especially what's happening politically here in the US has consumed a lot of psychic energy. And I find myself angry and battling against despair at times, and then moments of real hope and optimism because I catch glimpses of the ways in which this tricky time is bringing folks together. But it doesn't feel easy and it feels fatiguing, and I suspect that many of you feel the same way. And so I just share that about myself to hope you recognize that you're not alone and that we're all going through this in some way, shape, or form. And I hope in the midst of it, you're able to offer yourself good care and lots of grace. That's a lot about what this episode of the podcast is about, is what does it mean to show up for ourselves in the midst of the journey that it is to be a creative, to be a human in the contemporary world. But yeah, in the midst of everything that's going on, I hope that you'll continue to surround yourself with community. You'll get lots of good food and sleep and be really gracious with yourself in the midst of it all. I wanted to share with you a few stories today. And the first one is the story of an experience I had recently in a coaching session that just made me laugh and reminded me of so many previous conversations I've had. And so I thought I'd share it with you. There's a client that I've been working with, and in this, I share this story in no way as a judgment of this person, but more as an opportunity to relate to my own experience and hopefully relate to yours as well. But this person came to a coaching session with me, and this is someone I've been working on with their voice, and they had heeded some of my advice, which was to lean into recording themselves singing some songs. You know, depending on where you are in your journey with regards to singing, I might really encourage you to do more recording. I find it to be an incredibly useful tool for learning to listen to yourself critically and not judgmentally. I find those to be two very different things. Side note for some of you that are recording yourself all the time, and that's the primary way in which you're showing up with your voice and your voice journey, I might tell you to knock it off for a minute. But for a lot of us, we can tend to avoid stepping into the revealing process of recording ourselves, listening to ourselves, looking at ourselves, because it can feel very emotional. It can feel very raw. It can feel very overwhelming to do. But quite honestly, that's all the more reason to do it. And once you've done a certain amount of technical work on your voice, just actually sitting down and recording and then starting to listen with a critical ear and try to move beyond the emotional response that you have, it can be a really useful tool. And so this client, I had suggested that they do that. And at our session, they brought back to me a recording that they had done. And they told me that they wanted to share it with me with quite a large amount of trepidation and insecurity. And, I totally get it. It's very vulnerable. It's very vulnerable to sit and listen to yourself, but it's especially vulnerable to sit and listen to yourself with someone else. But it's something I'm quite comfortable with. I've spent a lot of years doing it, both with myself and with others. And so I asked this person to play the recording, and we sat and we listened. And my first reaction was pretty much always the reaction that I have when someone's willing to share with me in that kind of courageous way. And I'm just impressed. I'm pleased with what I hear. I love the journey. I love the process. And then simultaneously, I can often quickly offer critique, shall we say, or suggestions about how it might be done different. But generally speaking, if someone shares something with me like that, I will at first offer them the ways in which I can honestly offer praise, because again, I think it's such a vulnerable thing to do. But then my next question is typically, what do you hear? What do you like? What do you find works well? Or what do you feel frustrated with in what you hear? And this person launched into the things that frustrated them. But early on in the story, they disclosed that they were generally frustrated by the fact that this was the fourth take of recording the song, and that to them felt like a lot. And I couldn't help but pretty much laugh in their face. Not because they were being stupid or ignorant, but because it's all relative, isn't it? And I heard myself and my own frustrations in that. But full disclosure, 4 takes is absolutely nothing. I mean, if you knew how many times people record things, myself included, but I mean, if you just did a little bit of research, when someone actually records a song that they put out into the world, especially the people that are doing it at a very high level, oftentimes they've recorded it hundreds or thousands of times. And many times they've pieced hundreds, if not 1,000 pieces of their recordings together to get the version that you hear. And we lose track of that. We imagine that someone waltzes into the studio and just lets it rip and it sounds amazing. And I mean, who's to say that might happen once in a while, but it's my experience that more often than not, people are recording again and again and again and again. And then also there's this great irony that people often go back to earlier takes in their recording for their final take. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But 4 times to this person who shared their recording with me, it seemed like a lot given their experience, which isn't a whole lot, recording themselves. And they were frustrated because, again, they had told themselves a story that others must do this more quickly. I guess they might have imagined that it gets done on the first take all the way through. Just the other day, I decided, it's not something I just decided, but it's something I've been deciding, that I would record a version of a sound healing that I would submit to the Tiny Desk recordings. If you're not familiar, National Public Radio does this series called Tiny Desk. You're likely familiar. But big celebrities, big musicians come and perform literally behind a desk at the NPR, National Public Radio studios. But each year they also run a competition where anyone, any Joe Schmo, me, can submit a YouTube video. And I decided to do this. And probably 2 weeks ago, I sat down and I recorded a video. And everything I do in this space is improvised. And I also want to say, this feels a little bit risky to me because what I do isn't music in a traditional sense. I create these immersive sound experiences. And while they're highly musical and they're inspired deeply by rhythm and harmony and all the structures that one might consider necessary to create music, my intention is really to sort of create a container or a capsule of sound that would be able to hold the listener on their path toward well-being, toward transformation. And so I know that nothing quite like that has graced the NPR desks. And so it feels like a bit of a risk. It feels like a lot of which I've been doing is sort of putting myself out there in a unique way. But I decided that now is the time to do that, to get that done. And so I sat down and I recorded a recording. And to my surprise, after a few takes, it came out and I was quite pleased with it. I thought it was pretty awesome. I was stoked about it. I went and I did some editing and I connected the audio to the video, and it all happened kind of smoothly, quickly. And then I went to upload the video to the website for Tiny Desk, and I realized that my recording exceeded the maximum length that they would allow. 10 minutes was the maximum. My recording was 10 minutes and 25 seconds. I thought maybe I could get away with it, so I uploaded anyway. No, it was rejected. So then I thought to myself, okay, well, that was pretty easy. So I'm just going to go back and do a shorter version, and I'll sit down and I'll improvise. And this time I'll make the setting even more beautiful, and I'll plan a few more things. So I do it. When I tell you this was a frustrating experience, I could not lock in another recording that felt good. I had about maybe 5 or 6 days before the deadline to get this done. And so I had a little bit of runway. But in my head, I had this image that I would sit down and sort of waltz through it again, and it would flow out of me and it would sound amazing. And then I would just upload it and bygones. That was not the case. I spent hours recording again and again and again, only to leave each session quite frustrated. I gotta laugh if you were to just like look, because I'm simultaneously recording video and audio. And if you just look, I'm recording the video on my phone in this case. You look at the many, many, many videos. My first reaction is to feel quite embarrassed over and over and over again. I'm doing this thing. And then to get to the end of that and not have anything that I feel good about or like. And you might be thinking that I'm just being hard on myself, and certainly there's some truth in that. But I also have done this long enough to know a certain type of standard that I'm trying to achieve, a standard that I've achieved before. And it's my hope to get something at least comparable to that. But here's what I'll say, and here connects the dots between the story of what I'm doing versus the one that my client shared. I recognize this process within myself, and as much as I struggle, just as much as everyone else, with frustration in these situations, I'm able, because of my experience, to offer myself quite a bit of grace along the way, quite a bit of generosity of spirit. In the past, I would have really beat myself up at the number of takes that it was taking. And I would give myself a pep talk and kind of slap myself across the face and go, this time you're going to get it. And when the day was over and it wasn't done, I would just keep going. I would keep trying to muscle and push through, only to find the content and the quality diminishing and diminishing. And now I know better. I get to a sort of burnout point and I actually stop. And I say, okay, the day is done. We're going to give it a go tomorrow. That's not what I want to do. I want to be done with it. I want to hand it off. But that's not really what often happens. It's often in those cases where you bump up against a wall. It's what I was saying earlier, that if you talk to a lot of people who record music in particular, they'll do a take or two at the beginning, and then they'll do like a bunch more. And then they'll go back in those first 2 takes. They had some sort of magic in them. They maybe weren't as perfect, but when you kept trying harder, when you kept pressing harder, when you kept aiming for perfection, there was something about the heart and the soul of the music that got removed. And so even though you might have found more accuracy, there was something more exciting in those initial takes where it felt like less was at stake. And this is very much the case with me. If I keep pushing, if I keep grinding, maybe there are aspects that work better, but by and large, I'll feel like the heart and soul of what it is that I'm trying to create and do, it's no longer there. So I think it was probably 5 days in a row that I was spending hours recording this damn video and feeling frustrated along the way, but also recognizing this pattern within myself and giving myself lots of grace and calling it quits when I felt done. You know, there are also just realities of your body. In this case with the voice, eventually I'd become vocally fatigued. And so you can't keep pushing through. I mean, people try to, but it's rarely on the path that will yield your best result. So on the day that the video was due, my back was up against the wall. And sometimes that's a really effective mechanism to get something done. But I did. I got it done, and I got the length that I wanted and the quality that I wanted, and I felt quite proud of myself. But the reason I'm telling you this story is that I want you to know that this process, this type of process in the past would have been wrought for me the same way it felt quite wrought for my client because of the stories and expectations I was putting upon myself. The erroneous belief that everyone else is doing this more easily, that they're not having to work as hard as I do, that it shouldn't take me this long. This is such a big part of this journey in the story, that narrative that it shouldn't take you this long. You shouldn't have to do this many times. To which I say, says who? I mean, how long should a creative process take you? Now, look, there are realities and constraints to our lives. There are time limits. There are deadlines. All of those things are important. But what I want us to do in this conversation today is think about the pain and the suffering it causes when we tighten our grasp around what we believe should or shouldn't be. When we set these sort of arbitrary timelines on ourselves, and we're quite violent and mean to ourselves in the process. I believe wholeheartedly that the creative process need not be a place of deep suffering. Is it a place of deep discomfort? Yes. Because as much as my client was sweating those 4 takes of that recording, that would make sense because they're entirely new to the process. Their nervous system doesn't have the capacity to necessarily sit with the repetition that it's actually going to take. And so you start and you do 4 takes and that feels like a whole lot. And then suddenly you find yourself in my shoes and it's hundreds of takes and that feels like a lot. But none of the numbers actually matter. What matters is my ability to meet myself in the process with grace, kindness, care, and self-compassion, to actually allow myself the permission to call it a day. I heard years ago, I don't know if this is true or mythology, but Rick Rubin, when he produces with someone, he always has a cutoff point when they're going to be done for the day. And he is quite meticulous about sticking to that. And often to the frustration of the artist, because they'll find themselves maybe in the midst of a flow and he will unplug the machine and call it good. But his fundamental belief is that at the heart of their success is their ability and willingness to take care of themselves through the process. And if the idea is there, it won't leave. You don't have to chase it. You don't have to grasp for it. You can allow it to be received and flow through. But that requires a certain type of self-compassion and care. And I'm going to overuse this word today, but I just think about it a lot. It's grace. Gracious. Think about a physical activity. When someone finds themselves fatigue, you can try to keep pushing, but there's a reality to the limits of your body. Sometimes with creativity, we aren't as good to ourselves as to recognize the realities and limits. And we concoct a story that if we just do it one more time, if we just do a little bit more, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that while there's so much value in having that drive and that vision, what's even more valuable is to the trust in the universe to meet that drive and that vision and that aspiration with a light grasp, so as to give yourself the ability to engage the process at the speed with which the universe will have you, at the speed that actually matches your capacity and will allow you to do a good job. I'm a hard worker, especially when I feel deep inspiration. When I feel really excited about something, I can go. And there are times where it's been really appropriate for me to get sort of into the vortex and I think about specific recording sessions or when I get really excited about an idea and I have the energy for it to stay in the flow. But I also know what it is to push past the point of return. I know what it is to keep going and going and going only to my own diminishment. And usually what drives that is a desperate sense of lack. That if I don't get this done now, I'm not worthy. That's really at the heart of it. Or again, comparison, shame, embarrassment. Like I mean it when I say I have experiences that I look at the number of takes on my phone and I literally feel embarrassed. I wouldn't want anyone to ever see how many times I've done this thing. And that's so stupid. Who cares? Like, who cares? But it's a story and a narrative that I built for myself and that people build for themselves all the time that says, I should be here. I should be able to do this. This should be done by now. There shouldn't be so many takes. I should be better than this. I've been doing this for so long. Aren't I more skillful than this? And that is just a fast path to suffering. It's a path beyond the discomfort of sitting in the creative process and growing, expanding our nervous system and turning into a path of self-violence. And I know that word sounds dramatic, but whenever we engage in shameful behavior, whenever we self-lacerate, self-chastise, admonish, there's sort of a violence that we enact toward ourselves that never points us toward healthy expansion and growth. It always points us toward fatigue and burnout. You know, as I rebooted this podcast, one of my personal goals was to be really honest with you in my life, in my process. And I was thinking today that in this theme, there's another sort of aspect to what's going on with me that I wanted to share with you because it relates to the story that my client had of it shouldn't have taken me this long. Also, before I share that, I wanted to say too that in my coaching work, this is a conversation I have all the time. Every client always, at some point they go, shouldn't I be further along? Is this taking me longer than it takes everyone else? Why haven't I figured this out by now? To which I never give them a satisfying answer because my answer is always, it takes how long it takes. I wish to God I had a magic wand to be able to help you bypass this process. But unfortunately, a part of the learning and a part of the growth is to sit in the discomfort and strangeness of feeling like you should be further than you are. That's actually a really good sign because it keeps you connected to your vision and your goal for what it is that you want to accomplish. But a part of the growth is dependent upon your willingness to surrender to exactly where it is that you are, however uncomfortable it is. But back to me. So I want to talk to you specifically about my journey with the reset, my immersive sound healing experience. You know, I started creating similar versions of this all the way back in 2018. And many of you know my story that in 2023, I got the opportunity. I was doing those in yoga studios, meditation studios, some unconventional spaces, mainly throughout Chicago. I did some travel with it. Never too much, big success or financial success. But in 2023, I got the opportunity to bring what I do to Orchestra Hall, the stage of Orchestra Hall here in Chicago. And that was a sliding door moment. It sort of shifted my focus. And that's where I thought, oh, what if I really bring this to similar stages? So I spent 2023 building the branding and the packaging. And specifically, I came up with the idea that I would market the reset as an experience and not necessarily try to promote myself individually as an artist, but sell this experience. At first, I was thinking primarily to orchestra stages because it felt really interesting, novel to bring this there. But then I realized there are only so many of those in the country. And if we wanted to get any momentum, have to go to other theatrical stages, black box theaters, etc. And so by 2024, I had worked my ass off. I had called everyone I've ever known. I called in every sort of connection I might be able to find. to attempt to bring this to some other stages. And I got booked in some cool places. I was able to go back to Orchestra Hall. I got booked at the Skirmer Run Symphony Center in Nashville. A number of really exciting places, Ravinia here in Chicago. I got to do the Kennedy Center, November of 2024, at Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. It was an epic experience. And then actually by the end of 2024, I had managed to connect with a booking agency that signed me, which was thrilling. But here's the real honest part about this. Every step of the way has been quite difficult. Has been like there were no points in this journey thus far where it felt like a tipping point, where there was a momentum that didn't require me to hustle pretty hard. I think naively, I thought some of the big bookings that I got, something like the Kennedy Center, that maybe that would yield some phone calls afterward. And if I'm honest with you, it hasn't. Now, it's not to say that I'm not grateful for the ways in which I've been able to get booked. And it's not to say that everything has been a terrible struggle along the way. I don't mean that. But I do mean it when I say, no one's calling me. No one's calling me or emailing or reaching out. Everything I have been booking has required quite a lot of chasing on my end. And a lot of that I was very and have been very happy to do because it felt exciting. It felt thrilling. The catch was exhilarating. Getting the Kennedy Center, something like that prior to this administration and everything that's unfolded there. But it felt like a big fucking deal, and I was so proud of myself. I am still so proud of myself for being able to create those opportunities for myself. But I want to say one thing I've learned along the way is that hustling and pushing has a time limit on it. And hustling and pushing and driving is not the same thing as manifesting. It's easy to confuse the two. And beware of people that are hustling their asses off and calling it manifesting, because they will bump up against a wall. I've done it myself. But I just share this with you, again, to be vulnerable and be honest and say that there have been a lot of times of deep fatigue through this process. And one of the things I'm so proud of myself with in this journey is similar to what I was telling you with the recording of the Tiny Desk submission, is that through wisdom, through experience, I've been pretty good about giving myself grace. Because there have been some dark nights where I'm deeply frustrated. Why aren't more opportunities coming? Why am I not able to just get a little bit of momentum? Why can't I get booked without having to fight for it? That's the question. Why didn't getting signed to an agency yield more momentum? At the end of 2025, I was looking ahead to 2026. A lot of these gigs, especially at theaters, they will get booked as long as a year in advance. I performed in Madison in January 2026, and that had literally been booked 13 months earlier. That's not uncommon. And so I have this awareness of the booking process. And as I was looking ahead to 2026, closing out 2025, if I'm honest with you, not really anything else on the books. I've managed to find a few opportunities that I'm looking forward to and I'm excited to share with you in the new year, but I'm still kind of staring into an abyss. And if you are self-employed or if you pursue creativity as a career, you know that abyss, it's hard on a number of levels. One is it feels scary financially. It feels scary from a livelihood standpoint. Now, I'm fortunate that I pursue income from a number of different ways and sources. And so I'm not singularly dependent upon anything, but obviously it's highly disappointing when one of those avenues, there isn't a lot of prospect for the not so distant future. It begs some questions for the creative around, is what I'm doing any good? Do people want it? Is it worthwhile? If no one's asking me to do it, does it matter? And again, those are dark nights of the soul. Those are long walks. That's what those are. And I've had a lot of those. But when push comes to shove, I really, 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 really believe in this thing. While the venues might not be asking me to come perform, you all keep affirming me. Every time I get the opportunity to create this experience, I get so much positive feedback. And can I just tell you, even aside from the feedback that others give me, I feel so good doing it. I want to travel and perform and create this experience in many different ways, shapes, and forms. I have something so dynamic and exciting to bring and give, and I keep getting better at what I'm doing, and I believe in its positive impact. I believe in its positive impact upon the people that attend, but I believe will have an incredibly positive impact upon the venues that say yes to me doing this. Everywhere I ever go, everyone always says to me, in terms of the venues, they'll say, we've never done anything like this before. And that is thrilling to me. I love that. But I also recognize that when you're at the front of a curve, when you're doing something for the first time, there is an uphill battle aspect to it. There's something that I call a buyer education piece. The people that buy for venues, this is so unique. It's so niche. They don't even know what it is. And so they have to be educated. And then there's an audience education piece. Like, actually, what does it mean to market an event like this and sell it to the audiences? There are so many factors that fall into this category that are unique. And I recognize that. And I believe in this path of carving a new path, breaking new ground. I don't know if you've ever heard me say this before, but I believe in this intersection between sound as a healing modality, performance, and music. And I think there's a whole new category of performance, but maybe even music that's emerging, something that maybe would have been called new age in the past, having this specific heading of sound healing, a category at the Grammys. And I would love to be one of the premier artists in this category. I would love to be someone really pushing the envelope. But I have to, how do I say this? I have to hold that dream with a loose fist, because if I squeeze too tight, fatigue sets in. And I have to know, based on my previous experiences, that this might take longer. This might take more takes than what I want it to do. And if I impose upon myself that this shouldn't take so long, why aren't I further? There's a type of suffering that emerges that I don't like. I'm very capable and willing to sit in the discomfort of creative growth. But I don't want to suffer. And I don't believe any of us should have to suffer amidst our process. I believe that we have to be uncomfortable. I believe that we have to be itchy. I believe that we have to have our heart beat fast as we do something new. I believe that we have to surrender to the unknown. But I don't believe that we have to lacerate ourselves. I don't believe that we have to talk shit to ourselves. I don't believe that we have to struggle deeply in the midst of it. And so I'm doing this dance that is, I hope, a dance of maturity that is around these moments of deep frustration, but also trusting that the universe and all of my guardian angels are carving the perfect path for me. They are laying out the foundation for when the right opportunities emerge for me to be so ready for them. To trust in the divine guidance of it all. I got another story for you. This is incredibly personal, but I feel like it's really relevant. So the other day I was listening to the Telepathy Tapes podcast. And if you haven't listened to the Telepathy Tapes, I hope you will. And you have to start at the very beginning to get the whole context. There are 2 seasons. And so I'm not going to tell you all about it, but it's really worth the listen. But I was listening to the most recent episode, and in short, this episode was an interview with the host, Kai Dickens, with family members of a woman who is a medium, a very well-known medium who's been studied at length by scientists and who has an incredible record with her work. And essentially, this was an interview with the family talking about how their life is quite normal and how it all sounds rather outlandish or wild, but the way that unfolds for them is just normal and true and real. And one of the daughters was telling about her discovery in her own life of having some of these gifts. And she specifically told a story of a friend passing. And upon the death of the friend, she decided to ask the universe specifically to give her signs from her friend. And she specifically asked for paper cranes. And she didn't know why she had asked for paper cranes, but she just decided she was going to test the power of the universe and her friend in the beyond. And she said, give me some paper cranes. And so wouldn't you know, over the next bit of time, I don't know exactly how long, paper cranes started showing up in the weirdest places, most unexpected places. So on my walk, I'm listening to the story. And, I absolutely believe in these kind of signs. And I believe in the power of those who have gone on before us. I mean, I've got such a roster now of people. I believe in intellectually in receiving those kind of messages and signs, but I don't know that my heart is always that open to them. It's very counter to how I was raised to believe, if I'm honest. But I stopped the recording on my walk and I said to myself, okay, I'm going to make a little deal with the universe, specifically about my mom. My mom loved hummingbirds. She collected figurines, statues, pictures. And so a hummingbird is an easy symbol to ask for with my mom. And so I said, hey, universe, mama, give me a hummingbird and give it to me today. So I sort of left that there. And later on that evening, I had this very specific memory of, again, walking down the sidewalk and I passed the business and it hit me. I didn't get my hummingbird today. I didn't see it. And, my instinct is in a situation like that is not to blame the universe or my mom, but to sort of blame myself. I guess I wasn't open to it. I guess I don't have eyes that will notice that sort of thing. Sort of disappointment in myself, if I'm honest. But I shrugged it off, and the next day came, and I thought about it again at some point, and no hummingbirds. And then the next day, I'm sitting on the sofa, and I get a text message, and I have an Apple Watch, and I look at the Apple Watch. And what do I see but a picture of a hummingbird? Someone had sent me a hummingbird. And so I pull out my phone, and it was from a woman that I had attended a meditation retreat with last October. We sat one afternoon in one conversation and ended up talking about my mom, and I told her about hummingbird. I think I even showed her my tattoo of the hummingbird that I have. But that was the only time we ever talked about it. And quite honestly, she and I haven't spoken since that. And it's been months. And her message to me was in an ice cream shop in San Diego, thinking of you. And it blew my mind. There was my hummingbird. It was right there. My hummingbird was right there. And what was dumbfounding and awesome was it hadn't happened on the timeline that I had asked for. And I just have to think that there was a little wink and a nudge from the universe and hopefully from my mom. Baby, we got you. Like, stop putting these harsh parameters that set you up for disappointment. Lay back. Trust. Allow. receive, surrender to the perfect timing that we have for you. It's probably going to take longer than you think, but who knows? Why are you shooting on this? Like, why does the hummingbird have to come today? What does that prove? I was so moved by that experience, and it really brought me back to this conversation around timelines and grasping. I just want desperately to move through the world with a profound level of trust, because I know it's just a smoother ride. I know it's a sweeter ride. I know it's a more heart-opened place. And I know the ways in which I have suffered in the past because I have thought that things should happen like this, that this is how long it should take. This is how many times I should have to record it. But ultimately, like I tell my clients, there's no right time. I don't know what it is. I do always think to myself, it's probably going to take longer than you think. And that's great, ultimately, because there have to be the right pieces that come together as a foundation for you to be ready. I believe in my heart of hearts that the universe does not give you anything that you're not ready for. And it doesn't mean there are lightning bolt moments where things happen. But I don't think that those lightning bolts even happen before we are ready. And so while you might think, I've done all this work, aren't I ready? Shouldn't this be done? Shouldn't I be further? While I think that people should be clamoring for the reset. You know, my vision is that I'm doing the reset at Madison Square Garden. I see myself doing it at a huge scale. I think I'm ready right now, but I also trust that the universe has the timing to put me in exactly where I need to be to impact the most people with my work, to express the most love possible, to connect the most deeply. And I'm doing something pretty niche, right? It's kind of far out. So don't rush the thing, Davin. Don't rush the thing. Trust, allow, receive. I shared in a previous episode of the podcast that there's this old phrase that often gets thrown around, and it's the joys in the journey. And I actually think there's one quick change that we should make to that. The joy is the journey. It's not in it. It is the journey. Like, if you can actually be present to the journey, it is joy. It will never be disappointment because you can recognize that your goals, your aspirations, you're being led there perfectly. Now, you might need to pivot at times. You might need to take a different route. I'm very open to that. But I also know in my heart of hearts that there are certain affirmations that the universe gives, that people give, that you feel they're worth pursuing longer than you're comfortable pursuing. This isn't about staying comfortable, but it's not about giving in to the path of suffering. And it's really about recognizing that if you have a goal, if you have an aspiration, if you have a desire, you're alive. You're in a place full of the potential for joy. If you arrive, you got to dream bigger. And that shit's hard. You know, I often think to myself, the Olympics are on right now, and I think about when one dedicates themselves for so many years, and then it happens and it's over, and that is an existential moment. And that's, I swear it's why you see someone like a Lindsey Vonn at the age of 41 attempting to go back for downhill skiing. I don't think it's because she's like missing something within herself, but I think it's because there's this human desire to continue to pursue growth. And at times we have to give up certain goals because we have to move on to something or more quality, something greater. But I really, really believe that this is a part of a life of flourishing, is to continue to desire and aspire, but you have to hold the outcome loosely because you don't have to suffer in the midst of it all. And when you grasp, when you squeeze, when you cling, when you should, you set yourself up for a whole lot of suffering. I offer this all to you with a heart of vulnerability. You know, I'm really so grateful to everyone who's helped me along the way and all the incredible opportunities I've received. And I don't take any of it for granted. And I don't feel like a failure. I don't mean to say that, but I mean to share with you honestly that I get real frustrated sometimes and I get down on myself and I get disappointed. And there are times where I feel embarrassed. There are times where I grow fatigued. But I also recognize I've done enough work and I have enough wisdom to recognize that those moments are so fleeting and they're usually connected to some story that I'm telling myself, some outcome that I'm requiring. And if I look back at my life, the most joyful, the most curious, the most playful moments are the ones where I didn't even expect the hummingbird picture to show up. I had no idea it would happen that way. Oh my God. It came. It's so awesome. Isn't life so awesome? So I say here now, I have the grandest hopes for what I do in the sound healing space. Amongst my other work, I have huge desires, but I also recognize that it's going to happen in unexpected places and ways, and I can't even dream it. I can't even know. I just got to keep on the path, keep working hard, keep showing up, keep expanding my capacity, sitting in the discomfort and sharing open-heartedly with each of you along the way, because I know you're doing the exact same thing. As always, I'd love to hear from you. If you want to share with me how my story connects with yours, or you'd like to share with me about your journey, please. I have another coaching spot that has opened up recently. If you want to jump in, my coaching work, check out davinyoungs.com. I'm really moving beyond just voice coaching into more holistic creative coaching. If you want to do work in the sound healing space, I'm doing some consulting work on that too. Connect with me on Instagram at Davin Youngs, and there'll be another episode coming soon. Until then, peace.